the reigning Super Bowl champs, the Philadelphia
Correct.
Eagles. How he does it again, even though it, by his own accord, it tried not to let it happen
Yeah.
because they take Jihad Campbell. They tried at one spot with the Chiefs to take Jihad Campbell, who they were apparently trying to go as high as 22 with the Chargers and thought they even had like a deal done to move up to take him there. But he falls all the way and they move up just to one spot to guarantee, just to clarify that. Like, they're not like the Chiefs aren't saying, hey, if you don't trade, we're taking him. It's just they want to definitively guarantee they get him, so they move up that one spot so nobody else can. But yeah, they walk away with the best linebacker, pure linebacker prospect in the class.
Also heard a kind of a fascinating take on that too, is since Howie, dude, the reports were Howie's trying to trade up for Jihad Campbell all the way up to like 22 with like the Chargers, I believe, as early as the Chargers. So he was willing to give up like an extra third round pick, maybe even two third round picks to get up that high. And so at the point where it got down to the Chiefs and them, he like giving up a fifth was like nothing to him because he was already willing to give up all these other picks. So what does a fifth matter? It's like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll just go ahead and do this. And those conversations are interesting, Dakota. We have talked about this a lot. I wish we could be in those war rooms or at least get video footage of these war rooms when the conversations are happening, especially with trades, because apparently the conversation with the Chiefs, which they're a rivalry at some point, right? I mean, they played each other in 2 Super Bowls now. Like, this is a legitimate competitor of theirs. It's not like a division rival, but I mean, it's Super Bowl rival. There's no bigger rivalry than that. So they're on the phone. It's like, okay, so how does this conversation go? Because of course the Eagles aren't going to tell them who they're picking, and the Chiefs aren't going to tell them who they want. So apparently it came down to, they basically asked offense or defense. And when they said defense, they're like, okay, the Chiefs are fine with trading back. But also people made the points like, well, if they knew they weren't taking their guy, why would Howie make the trade at that point? Because it's like, you know what I'm saying? But that's to your point. It's like you're also trying to make sure nobody else is going to trade up with the Chiefs and go get them as well. So, but dude, overall, listen, if they're going to play Jihad Campbell off the ball linebacker, this is a phenomenal pick, dude. I mean, like, people thought he was a top 10 player. There were several, like, for the longest time on NFL Network show on DJ's rankings, like, he was the highest rated player because it's like, dude, like, everyone else is gone. Jihad Campbell is the best player available. And Dakota, you made one of the best points I heard during the offseason, which is, it feels great when you come away with the best player at a position in the draft. And that's what they did. I mean, they got the best player at off the ball linebacker in the entire draft at a really weak linebacker class, dude. It's just not a strong linebacker class. So if they plan to play him at off the ball linebacker, which that's kind of debate that we'll get into, if they plan to play him at off the ball linebacker, it's a phenomenal pick.
Yeah, and he really is. The value of him there, like, personally, we don't disagree that he is a top 10 player in this draft. Personally, just don't love taking linebackers that high. But once you're sitting at 31 or 32, the value there is absurd. To be a defending Super Bowl champ and walk away with the best player at a position has to feel insane. And he's athletic, he's productive, he's good in coverage. He's a true 3-down, sideline to sideline linebacker who has phenomenal pass rushing skills. And to your point, there's been rumblings on whether they plan to play him inside or off the edge. And I agree, he's a great pass rusher, but playing off the edge is not necessarily his strong suit. Pass rushing and edge rushing are just 2 very different things. And Howie kind of had, I'll read the quote that he had, a bit of a, keeping it a bit vague, which I think could also just be due to wanting to hide the way you're going to use him. You don't really want to show your hand, so it makes sense. But, they basically just asked him bluntly, is he going to be an edge rusher or off-ball linebacker? And he says, we view him as a front 7 player who's got incredible versatility and a skill set to do both of those things, which is true. But to your, what you just kind of noted, I think it would be a mistake, in my opinion, to just try to make him purely play edge when his skill set is fantastic as an inside linebacker who can pass rush and blitz, and you can move him around and let him rush the passer from wherever.
Exactly, dude. I think he's much more valuable from that point of view. And also, if you're gonna move him to edge, and that's why, because listen, we just talked about how we don't value drafting linebacker that highly, and Howie Roseman's a pretty smart guy. I feel like he also wouldn't value taking or trading up for a linebacker, giving up third round picks. So maybe the plan is to move him to edge. And if that's the case, man, I don't love it, because not only because he's better suited to play off ball linebacker, but also there's better edge rushers on the board. I mean, Donovan Ezra-Cruz right there. We just got done talking about him. Mike Green was still on the board with all his question marks or whatever. Landon Jackson's there. Like, I can go on and on. There was more established edge rushers there if you specifically want to target edge. Now I don't think that's what they are doing. Ultimately, I think they are hoping he's a versatile player, and that hasn't worked historically as far as like guys that don't have a set position. But it is intriguing. Like, it's very intriguing, and he does have an interesting skill set because, like you said, he's really good at rushing the passer, but not on the edge, right? It's difference between blitzing and rushing off the edge. Big difference. So yeah, overall though, dude, great value where they got him, because I felt like when they took him, this was best player available. Like, that's how I felt about it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's not how we felt about it. But dude, listen, you have probably the most loaded roster in the NFL, and you can afford to take a guy who's not going to be seen as a starter, right? They just signed Zach Bond. They have Nakobe Dean, who has honestly started to break out, and like, so they're pretty set at off-ball linebacker. But you're the Eagles. You don't have to draft for need, and that's what makes you the best team in the NFL, right? That's what makes you defending Super Bowl champions, when you don't force need picks in the draft. You just take the best player available.
I think they're the first team, as we've gone through these, where they don't have a rookie projected to start on our lads. He's projected to be backup to Nakobe, but he provides a different skill set than both of them. Like we talked about, the pass rushing ability means that you can plug him in pass rushing situations. He can drop back in coverage. He can rush the passer. He could do whatever you need him to. So it gives you more tools to play with. And to your point, with a roster that is so deep already, this is how you future-proof it as well. You just add depth pieces that are fantastic players who will now step up at some point. You can use them here or there, but at one day they're going to take over the reins. And Nakobe has had injuries at times as well, so you need depth there for if Nakobe gets hurt again. I love the value there. We'll see what they end up doing with him. But I think Howie's he's playing with smoke a little bit there. I think he's trying to hide his hand on what we'll see out of Jihad. But and then, shockingly, he's not projected to start, but they take Andrew Makuba, safety out of Texas in the second, who kind of has the ability to potentially get in and start at safety. We've got Sidney Brown and Reed Blankenship currently projected as their two safeties, but Makuba has the ability to go in there and compete for one of those jobs pretty early on.
Yeah, man, he's a great player. Forced an incompletion on 26.1% of targets in college. Also had a 90 overall grade in 2024. Really productive safety, man. And again, I'll reiterate, dude, when you have such a loaded roster, you have the luxury of doing something like this when you don't need a safety. You didn't need an off-ball linebacker, but you can take them. You can take who you believe is the best player available or fits your scheme, because you have such a loaded roster that you don't desperately need to go fill a guard hole, or you don't desperately need to go fill a tight end hole like the Colts did. I'll just throw a shot at my own team. Like, you don't desperately need to go do those things, because you don't have any holes on the team. And you're right, dude. He could be a contributor at some point. Doesn't have to be right away, which is what you really love. That's ideal for a second round pick. You don't want your second round pick to have to go immediately play, because there's a huge transition from going to college ball to the NFL. So I think, again, great pick for them, great depth piece, and great player.
And we use the word compete a lot, and I think that's the scenarios that you love is when you have a guy that can just go compete for a job. You don't need him to be the guy that takes that job, but you want to add pieces that are compete. You want competition every day in practice like that, and guys who are fighting. To coaches say those cliche things a lot, like the depth chart is set every week based on how people practice and things like that. So the Eagles have gotten where they're at from consistently doing that, drafting guys, adding depth, adding competition and then letting those guys earn those spots. So they continue to do it, and they drafted volume as well.
They
The
do.
defending champs drafting 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 times. A lot of that is in the fourth and later, but still potential guys to come in and add depth at those positions. They take Ty Robinson, the D tackle out of Nebraska, pretty athletic guy, 6'5", 288, 4'8", 340, pretty fast, pretty athletic. People kind of expected him to add a little bit of depth to the D line after losing Milton Williams. They still have the 2 Georgia guys, but they love to rotate. And Milton kind of broke out this past season and then goes and gets a huge contract. So what do? You add more depth and you rinse, recycle, repeat. You add guys in there and then you just continue building it.
Agree, man. And listen, you just talk about drafting the volume. Love it, dude. More at bats, more chances to hit. That's just how this game works, dude. That's how the good teams play it, man. It's how the Ravens do it. It's how the Eagles do it. Some of the best teams in the NFL take this approach, which is, yeah, we have a loaded roster. And listen, some of these guys might not even make the Eagles 53 this year, but it's more at-bats, man. You get more chances to hit on guys. And I don't know who's hit on late-round picks like Howie Roseman out of any GM in the NFL. I mean, he just does that at such a consistent rate. So compared to everyone else, that is. And another pick I like that there's Kyle McCord in the 6th. Listen, out of the developmental quarterbacks in this class, Kyle McCord was one of the most fascinating to me. I felt like his tools were just better than a lot of the other quarterbacks in this class. And when we're talking about developmental guys in the 6th round, I almost would rather go for the toolsy guy that wasn't always super consistent. Although he was really good his last year at Syracuse, man. It would have been interesting. We'll never know this. It would have been interesting if Ohio State decided to roll with McCord for one more year. Obviously, worked out for them. They got Will Howard. They went on to win a national championship. But I'm not convinced that McCord couldn't have done the exact same thing in that offense, to be honest with you. And I also love the Eagles' process with this, man. They are literally the poster child for taking developmental QBs. They constantly do it. It seems like they take a developmental QB every draft. And listen, just go back now. This isn't the same because he was a 2nd-round pick compared to a 6th-round pick. But dude, when they took Jalen Hurts in the 2020 draft, Carson Wentz was still the guy. Like Carson Wentz was still the guy. Seemed like he was still the franchise quarterback.
Yeah.
But it ended up being Hurts, and it ended up being Hurts that led him to the Super Bowl. So, you got to keep those kind of things in mind, man. You never know when it's going to end. Like, I'm not saying Jalen Hurts' career is about to be over, but you just never know. You just never know, dude. So I love taking chances on developmental guys in the 6th.
Yeah, those videos circulated after the draft again of people reacting to their picks that were where they were like, what was this? And it's ones that aged horribly. And there was one that was the Eagles one, where they draft Jalen Hurts and all these fans are like, what is the worst pick ever? And now here they are, and he's won you a Super Bowl. So
exactly.
I agree. They took Tanner McKee a couple years ago, and he's played a little bit and honestly didn't look bad. And adding Kyle McCord to the quarterback room, I think they signed traded for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. But to be honest, he could be the odd man out there because to me, he's just never looked that good in the times he's gotten to play. So we'll see what happens in the competition. But I agree, adding Kyle McCord, a more of all the QBs, we talk about athleticism these days. He's probably one of the least athletic, more of just pocket passer, get the ball out, throw the ball, which is a little bit different too than what Jalen does. And it's interesting because Tanner's kind of the same way. So they always have their backups be a little bit of a different skill set than what Jalen Hurts does. But I think that's good value for a guy that was kind of projected to go higher than that as well. Again, most of these QBs kind of fell. And then add a ton of depth at other positions. We won't dive into these guys too much, but Mac McWilliams, who I think a lot of people were pretty high on, corner out of UCF as a guy that can come in, compete. Again, athletic dude. They drafted a lot of athletic guys, which you have the luxury of doing when you're like the Eagles as well, where your roster is already really deep. You can take a little bit more shots on these more athletic guys in the later rounds and hope they pan out because you're not as reliant on them needing to play early. So linebacker, Smell Martin Jr., high athlete, 4'5", dude. Drew Kendall, athletic as well, center, that can come in and add some depth there. Yeah, a theme. You draft, except for Kyle McCord, but he's the quarterback. You don't need him to be as athletic.
Well, and
Um,
even though he's not athletic, he had one of the biggest arms in the class, so he still has that
yeah,
like
he's got a cannon. Yeah.
upside in a way. So yeah, I mean that's the kind of the theme of this draft. They took a lot of upside guys outside of which again, when you're in the 6th round, you're in the 5th round. That's
Right.
what you want, dude. You want to take like big swings, and a lot of time on a big swing you'll strike out, but sometimes you hit a home run. Like a big swing they took a couple years ago, Jordan Mailata, I think 6th round pick, 7th round
Yep.
pick on a left tackle, developmental left tackle, and it ended up being the best left tackle in the NFL potentially. So another guy I like too, Cameron Williams in the 6th. I think he has a decent amount of upside. And listen, with this article mentions it, Lane Johnson's getting older. They need to start thinking about replacing Lane Johnson at tackle. He's still great. He's still at a high level. Don't get me wrong. He can still play. It's just, listen, a lot of those guys from that 13, I believe, class are starting to retire,
Yep.
starting to leave the NFL.
One of the only good
So-
players from that class. Yeah.
Exactly. And Teron Armstead was another guy that was a good player from that class, literally just retired. So dudes from that class are going. So you have to start thinking about that. And again, I just mentioned Mailata as a late pick. Like Howie Roseman loves hitting on offensive linemen in these late rounds, man. He's really, really good at it. So who knows, maybe Cameron Williams is that next guy he hits in the late rounds.
Yeah, and then pairing him with Miles Hinton, tackle out of Michigan, two behemoths as well. 6'7" and 6'8", or sorry, 6'7" and 6'6". And I think Jordan Mailata is 6'8". So adding absolute demons to the tackles, to those that depth chart there is what Howie likes to do. Put those huge dudes in there and let them play. So, and then last pick's Antoine Powell-Ryland, which again comes back to something of adding depth at edge, something that Howie's always going to do. So overall, just feels like another really solid class from them. UDFA wise, no names stood out massive to me. Montrell Johnson, running back from Florida. Some of these SEC guys we're a bit more in the know with personally, just because of having to play against them typically. But that's the main name that stood out to me. And then Kyman Rucker actually is a minicamp invite, the edge from North Carolina. I feel like he had gotten hyped up a couple years ago when he was younger. So adding a few more guys in there to compete. With that in mind, what was your favorite pick?
Well, listen, I love the Jahad Campbell pick, but I'll kind of leave that one for you, or if you want to go a different direction as well. But I'm going to go Kyle McCord. I just think Kyle McCord will likely never play snap for the Eagles, but I just love the process of taking developmental QBs, even though you're quote set at the position. They thought they were set at the position with Carson Wentz. That's why you got the reaction that you got from some of those Eagles fans. It's like, well, we don't need a quarterback. Why are we taking Jalen Hurts, this unknown prospect or whatever? It's like, well, because it's fluid, man. It's a fluid situation. And even if Kyle McCord, kind of like we saw with Joe Milton, right? Last year with the Patriots, you take Drake May early, then you take Joe Milton late. Well, Joe Milton has shown so much in the preseason. Look what they did. They ended up flipping him for more draft capital. That's always a possibility as well. Some of these rookies show, potential in training camp and then into the preseason. And some team likes to take a shot on a guy like that. So that adds some value as well. I just think it's good process, man. So I'll go Kyle McCord.
Love it. I will. I think it's the first one I've done it, but I'm going to go Jihad Campbell, the first round pick. I think just letting the board moving up. I don't care if they gave up a 5th, whatever they gave up. I think it was a 5th to move up.
It was.
They had capital. Didn't matter. They still finished with 3 5th round picks. So, but taking the best linebacker prospect in this class as the defending Super Bowl champs just feels ridiculously good for them. So love that. With that in mind, what was Renee Bugner? What was the composite score for the Eagles class?
Really good draft class for them, according to the consensus. 5th overall draft class in the NFL. The rich get richer, as they say, the defending Super Bowl champions. But listen, it's not surprising. That's why these good teams are good, man. They have good draft process, and the Eagles have good draft process year in, year out.
Love it. And I think I agree with it. So that is the Eagles 2025 class.